We're back in the rather depleted exhibition hall because most of the NGOs have been evicted to make way for the politicians. They've still got representatives here, the numbers have been cut, so if you're pro rata. Although I think on Friday the numbers are being cut to 90, and there's much anger about that because there's a sort of feeling that the negotiations are going on, reaching a stage, and the eyes of the world are not quite on them. The media is here, but the NGOs with their particular skills and knowledge are not going to be here in numbers for this important political last 2 days. Anyway, for the moment, we have someone who is here, Rachel Berger, Climate Change Policy Advisor at Practical Action. And we've been talking today a lot about the negotiations, and so if you've got any insight on that, we'd love to, to hear them, as well as I know we should talk a little bit about adaptation, because climate change is on the way and people are going to have to adapt.
Yes.
So first of all, can I just ask you about how long have you been here actually at the talks?
Since the beginning.
Oh, okay. So you have a feeling: negative, positive, optimistic, pessimistic?
No, I mean, I came here thinking, well, miracles might happen. But as the days go past, and not only no miracles, but actually very little real negotiation, just people having intransigent positions, it's very hard to maintain hope.
Yes.
Yes. I mean, on the adaptation side, we started off with a very complex text with many, many brackets. We've worked hard, a group of us, suggesting alternatives, putting forward the key things that we felt were important. And we've ended up with a draft text which doesn't look too bad, except in one or two key respects. And then it's not clear what status that text has in the light of the latest LCA chair's draft decision.
Sorry, you'll just have to tell us what LCA is for those of us who are not quite such avid watchers.
Two ad hoc working groups for the last several years, one on the Kyoto Protocol and one on long-term cooperative action to prevent dangerous climate change, which was set up because the US is not party to the Kyoto Protocol, and also in order to stop dangerous climate change, the larger developing countries that make substantial emissions have to be brought in somehow. And so this LCA track was intended to complement the Kyoto Protocol track, which is negotiating the second commitment period.
And I saw on the order, I may be wrong, I saw on the order paper, I thought I saw on the order paper some note that the negotiators who've been discussing this track will report back today, but I'm not sure if that's right or not.
Well, it seems that they've run out of time. So what was intended was that negotiators would have had a fairly clean text with some key political issues missing. And these would have been left for ministers to decide. The problem is that they have lost so much time on negotiations through not focusing or intransigence among different governments that ministers have been presented in the words of a colleague with a dog's breakfast, so they can't make sense of it. They're not technical people, they haven't much time. So now we're in the situation where the rumours are flying around that other texts will be put on the table. It's not uncommon for the president of the COP to put a text on the table. The Danish government did this last week. It got leaked and it was slammed as being not really a pro-development text at all. It favoured the developed countries. So there is therefore mistrust in another president's text coming to the table. It's quite possible that the EU will put a text forward, but what ministers then do with all these different texts, apart from lobby for their own text, it is quite unclear. And the risk is that with heads of state coming in for just one day, although some of them are arriving earlier, instead of making a big decision, they will actually be negotiating. And that's a real challenge. So although we've been aware that maybe the actual final figure on long-term finance would wait until Friday, it now looks at quite a lot of other substance could wait until Friday. We haven't got adequate emissions reductions on the table to be anywhere near like a 2-degree world. We're definitely heading towards 3 or 4 degrees. And yet the rhetoric is we're heading for a 2-degree world.
Oh, that's a little pessimistic. It sounds a bit of a muddle. Just stepping back a stage, it's always a curiosity in these negotiations, which are government-to-government negotiations, essentially. So you're not government, you're a group with a specialist knowledge and who's been following it. How do you, and yet you said you've been working on this issue, how do you get your recommendations, your ideas onto the agenda?
Well, we don't have them on the agenda. We work behind the scenes and then talk to delegates. There's very good access for NGOs to delegates here, even to ministers. And we've had 2 ministerial meetings from UK NGOs, one with Douglas Alexander and one with Ed Miliband. And we're due with another, but obviously schedules have got shoved around. At the official level, the delegate level, we've already had several meetings with UK heads of delegation this fortnight. So we have very good access to people, but we look at the text, we make recommendations of what we want, and we talk to those delegations that are friendly to our views and hand them that text to help them negotiate with. So on adaptation, that's particularly the least developed countries, the AOSIS countries. With our own governments or the developed country governments, we don't give them the text, but we do lobby for them to change their position and give them reasons why.
Okay, we'll have to hold that there for a minute because I'm going to ask my colleague Jeffrey Allen, who's monitoring Twitter and other. It's interactive, so do send in your questions. We get all sorts of questions, so here goes. Let's see what the first one is.
Well, I just want to remind everybody that we are broadcasting live on OneClimate.net, so you can put in your questions or comments there or use the Twitter hashtag OneClimate. One thing that struck me while you were talking is that many people have been, I've been hearing around the conference here today from many different sources, oh, we still have optimism. Remember back in Bali, this is where we were back in Bali 2 days before the end of the conference, and everything came together in the last 2 days. But it sounds from you don't have that same sort of optimism, that you think this is somehow worse than previous negotiating sessions. Is that fair?
I think it's fair. I mean, what we ended up with in Bali was just about what we needed. It wasn't as strong as what we'd hoped for, but it was just about enough, and it was a mandate to a 2-year period of negotiations. But what we've seen is week after week of this year's negotiations, and we've had 8 weeks of them, get eroded by not enough progress being made. And you see, originally, the targets from the developed countries for the next commitment period for the Kyoto Protocol should have been on the table in March, and time after time there's been delay. The EU was supposed to come up, or recognised a need to come up with stronger long-term finance proposals middle of last year, and then time after time it goes, and the EU Council decisions don't have the right information. They're not willing to make a decision, and so this is why. And we're seeing real sort of, the US is not able or politically able to come to the table with what's needed. They're pushing back to China to come up with real legally binding commitments, but unwilling to be legally bound themselves.
And just in the plenary a few minutes ago, or a little bit earlier today, a Swedish representative was speaking on behalf of the EU, and he said that the EU is ready to commit to 30% reduction targets if the rest of the world comes along. And he made a very forceful statement pointed directly at the United States and China, and said, it's up to you now to take the step, and we're ready to jump, but we need to jump together with you. So it sounds like you've laid a lot of the blame at the foot of the EU. What about the United States? What about China?
Certainly wouldn't put a lot of the blame on the EU. That wasn't my intention at all. We've been wanting the EU to be clear about how they're going to move to 30% for some time. And I think that statement is a welcome statement. It does make it clear. But I just think those 2 big powers are playing off against each other, and the interests of the planet are not foremost in their minds.